Hi, Sandy. Welcome to the High Vibration Living Podcast.
Hi, Whitney. How are you? Thank you so much for having me.
Well, it's a treat to have you on. You are deep into the health and wellness sector. And I mean, like really deep, which is what I like because that's what I do here on the High Vibration Living podcast. Like, I'm not entry level. I really like being at the bottom of the rabbit hole and then searching even deeper for answers, especially answers that like really resonate for each individual. So I really want to learn more thyroid health, aging gracefully, what we can do for our physical, emotional, spiritual, and mental body just to kind of elevate our life and wherever we are right now. So I want to know a little bit more about, let's start off. Tell me a little bit more about what your thyroid diagnosis was and how you chose to treat it at that time with what you knew.
Hmm. I'm going to even go back just a little bit further because I feel like support for women, it's getting better for sure.
Yeah.
But back when I had my second child, I had many symptoms that could have been diagnosed but weren't
Mhm.
of potential, and I can't say it was a diagnosis because I was never diagnosed, of postpartum thyroiditis. For anybody who's a mom out there, you go to the doctor to check on wellness for the baby. And, oh, now it's this time for the vaccination and this time for the vaccination. Meanwhile, a lot of us moms could be dealing with a lot of health issues after the birth of our children. And I knew nothing about this. Like I could call myself a holistic mom. Back when I was in university, my nickname was Mama, believe it or not, even though I used to party my face off. And but I had it in me, but I hadn't gone back to school and I hadn't really tapped into it. And so I had a lot of issues postpartum. And, being very, very thin afterwards, not having enough breast milk to breastfeed. I wasn't sleeping. I had a husband who traveled almost weekly. So there was a lot there that I was not supported in my wellness journey after I gave birth. Then fast forward, so I was 35. Fast forward to the age of 40. My daughter at the age of 5 was diagnosed with a cancer. And thankfully, she's fine. She's now 19. So this is a long time ago. And exactly 1 year after that, I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. So that's a very short story. There's a lot in between there. And what happened was during the time that she was not well, I think it was thyroid issues that were there all along, but were exacerbated by the immense stress that I was undergoing by taking care of a 5-year-old child that was diagnosed with cancer. So my health really went on the back burner, and it was an incidental finding that I had, for the first time in my life at age 41, had a migraine with aura. And so my doctor was like, and I had a great doctor, and she was a substitute at that time. Anyway, she said, this is not normal for migraines to begin for women at age 41. Typically, they start at puberty for a lot of women. So she did a lot of investigative studies. A lot of investigative tests, including an ultrasound of the carotid arteries. And they're like, everything looks fine. I did a brain MRI. I mean, she did everything. And they're like, everything looks great, except we found 5 nodules on your thyroid. So we should probably do some investigative tests to see if there's anything suspicious. And they found that one of those 5 nodules was in the fine needle biopsy, potentially papillary carcinoma, which is a type of thyroid cancer. So they removed my entire gland plus 2 nodules. 2 lymph nodes. And at that time, I was really scared, Whitney. And it was very much all right, well, if you don't take the whole thing out, 80% of cases come back and have to have the whole gland removed, even though it was, it was only on one side. So I took the whole gland out, and then they said, you'll take 1 pill and you will be fine for the rest of your life. Don't worry. And I found myself literally dwindling away as a human taking Synthroid T4 only. And so then I'm like, there's got to be a way, like a better way. And I started researching. I started seeing naturopathic doctors. I started to figure out how can I rebuild my health. I found out that really the crux of the issue was adrenal glands, very weakened adrenal glands, which made a lot of sense from the stresses before, the thyroid issues from when I had my second child, and then my child being diagnosed with cancer. Well, of course, stress was an issue. And of course, the adrenal glands are tied to your thyroid health, but nobody talked to me about this. And so I actually worked with a lot of different practitioners to build back thyroid function, to educate myself on thyroid health. And then I went back to my endocrinologist and he looked at me like I had, 4 eyes. And I said, I need you to give me T3 because I'm having trouble converting the T4, which is the inactive thyroid hormone, to the active thyroid hormone to give me back my vitality. So that's how it all began. And then I went back to college when I was 46 to do what I do now.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So when women are doing their own personal research and they're starting to discover that their symptoms are kind of matching up with thyroid issues, where do we go? Who is the right doctor to start working with that's going to give us a more holistic approach instead of just lead us to a path that's straight to a prescription or surgery? Like, how do we start slowly to discover what the root cause is and to improve where we're currently are?
So the biggest thing, Whitney, is that thyroid, it gets so complicated because thyroid touches everything in your body. It makes you hot. It makes you cold. It makes you anxious. It makes you depressed. So this is probably why getting the testing is not that easy to do. So a lot of doctors will always start with just checking TSH. But TSH, it's crazy. You can always look normal on a TSH test, but have a lot of other things going on, including autoimmune diseases. So unless you get that full panel, you're not going to know. And the way to get that full panel blood work is to see either, depending on where you are in Canada, like there's all these like home tests, blood tests, which are great. I'm a big supporter of really taking some control and having autonomy in your own health. So if you're able to order blood work to do at home with a finger prick, do it. There's a few companies out there that you can look into and they do full panel. So we are looking at TSH, that's the thyroid stimulating hormone, which comes from the pituitary. It's the hormone. It's not even your thyroid hormone. That's the crazy thing. So doctors will check TSH. It comes from the pituitary. So it's the
That
signal.
is wild. Because it's so interesting because I've been to a Dr. Joe Dispenza conference and
Oh, yeah.
you meditate for 7 days. It's actually really fantastic. But in between meditations, it is scientific lectures showing you how your brain and body works with a big focus on the pituitary gland. And how do you essentially reset your pituitary gland so you can reset the health of your body? It's
Well,
like the on off button. It's fascinating.
right. So if you think about how, and if you look at the traditional Western medicine system, everybody works in silos. You've got a doctor for this, you've got a doctor for that, you've got a doctor for this. But really, our body is so intelligent that when you are undergoing severe stress, well, that's going to affect that pituitary function, which might affect your thyroid function. So, yes, so you go to the doctor, they check your TSH, which is actually a hormone that's not even your thyroid hormone. But what you need to do is check TSH, your free T3, which is the free unbound thyroid hormone that's actually doing what it needs to do in the body, free T4, which is like having the supplies to make the T. So naturally, our thyroid, about 80% of our thyroid is T4 that's made from the thyroid. But you need to test. What is your body actually, what is free and unbound and usable by the body? So TSH, free T3, free T4. And then there's antibodies. And antibodies would be dependent on what are your symptoms, because there are different antibodies that are tested and it gets a little bit more complicated. And it really depends on your symptoms. Are your symptoms more of hyper or
Mhm.
hypothyroidism? And we didn't really get into that, but they're on opposite ends of the spectrum. So if you think of, and I've been on both, oh God, I've been on both, Whitney. I've had TSH of 32 where I felt like, my face was this big. I had severe edema. I couldn't get out of bed. I was so cold.
And is that
I
hypo or
still
hyper?
remember one time. Sorry, I didn't hear you.
Is that hypo or hyper when you have those
Hypo.
symptoms? Hypo.
Hypo. So you gain weight. Think of everything is slowing down. It's like your body's in like preserve mode and all functions slow down. Everything from your metabolism to even, instead of having anxiety, you would probably have depression. I still remember there was a time my daughter was young at the time, and I'd be like, "Honey, can you just put more blankets on me?" And she would just keep piling blankets on me, and you can't get warm. It's a horrible feeling. But then hyper is a very scary feeling. It's that anxiousness, the jittery, you're not sleeping. And it's interesting because you could be eating but more out of anxious feelings, so it's like you keep eating to try and feel some sort of comfort. That's the other end of the spectrum. I was there for like 5 years, Whitney, because after I had cancer at that time, they said we need to suppress your TSH, which means a virtually undetectable TSH, so zero. So you have a spectrum on your TSH. TSH is still important, but that spectrum is a little bit wide in that I think it's something like, it depends on where you are. In the US, I think it's around zero point 0.5 to 4.5 or 5.0 in blood work. And you can feel like absolute crap if you hit a 3. And many doctors will not even further test you if you're in that range. So you can never see if you even have antibodies or if maybe there's something off with the conversion of that T4 to T3, because there's other measurements that come in. It gets so complicated. The thyroid's super complicated, Whitney. And
Oh, I
I don't
know. I've been tested since I was in high school, and I've had every
really.
symptom. Yeah, I've had every symptom on both ends that you've described at some point in my life. I have been getting tested since I was 15 years old. My grandmother's thyroid was removed because she had issues, and back in her time, they just did surgery and removed their thyroid. So both my mom and I have had problems our whole life. However, every time we went and gotten tested over the past 30 years, they always just say, "Oh, it just comes back as normal. You're close to this or you're close to that, but not enough."
Mm.
But luckily, I've chosen to never take medication either way. But I feel like I've never gotten to the root cause and fully healed whatever the issue is, because I've gone through those times where I was so bitter cold, there was nothing that could warm me up, not even laying in the sun on a hot rock. I'd walk around, my office in a heavy wool coat. I understand it's to the bone. You can't warm to the
Yeah.
bone. And I'm in Southern California. So I understand. And that's why I wanted to have you on and have this conversation, because I just want to keep the spark alive in people who have had the test or have the gut feeling that something's off in the thyroid, and to remind them, like, keep going. You get to find the answer for your body. And maybe it's what you're talking about. Maybe it's actually starting with our adrenal health and then working our way into the thyroid.
And I think that's important to note right there, what you just said, because we don't live like we used to. We don't live like our grandparents lived.
I know.
We
I
don't
wish we
live off
did.
the land. I know, right? And if you're not getting quiet sometimes. And listen, we all have busy lives. I make a concerted effort to shut down, to get into nature, to ground, to do all the things. I do meditation. I have numerous, and people think it's counterintuitive because I use electronics to get myself there, but whatever it takes to get my brain in an alpha theta state, I do it because our lives are not really conducive to it. So if you're always up here, you're always going to be stressed. And then, things get more critical as we age and we get closer to perimenopause and menopause. Then our bodies are even less resilient to this type of stress. So I always say support your adrenals. People don't even realize that simple nutrients. I know you're a chef and you know a lot about nutrients. And, one of the ways I started to rebuild adrenal function way back when was to do IV drips.
Wow.
And a lot of them they were with my naturopath doctor. A lot of them were mostly the Myers cocktail that had high doses of vitamin C.
Really?
And what people don't realize is vitamin C is like a tonic for your adrenal glands. They soak it in.
This is
And
so interesting.
yes. So everyone talks about ashwagandha, rhodiola, and
Yes.
yes, they're wonderful adaptogenic herbs. But if you take in lipos, so let's say you don't have a major problem, but you have a busy life, busy world, busy everything, as a chef that we have to eat our vitamin C because we've lost that ability to make it. Animals still make vitamin C and we still make vitamin D. That's if we get in the sun, right? And then everybody's hiding from the sun these days and globbing on tons of sunscreen because they're afraid of the sun. So with vitamin C, simple liposomal vitamin C in a higher dose will help support adrenal function. And then there's so many nutrients that support thyroid health that is not really readily available in all of our food sources like it used to be. And from the soil, you would know that the depletion of the minerals in the soil.
We're coming back. That's the beauty of regenerative farming and more farms turning to that, and we're going to see more people at the farmers market, and we're already seeing more labeling on vegetables at the grocery store and on meat saying this is from a regenerative farm. That's 100% our practice, which will slowly rejuvenate the soil. But I do think a lot of people hope that the food that they turn to can just fix them. But it's not 100% the answer. We still have to kind of supplement along the way. And I really like you bringing up the reminder of vitamin drips. And I have found that the vitamin drips I've experienced at doctor's office, those have been great. But whenever I've tried to use those IV wellness centers, I have a horrible reaction.
Really?
I get really sick, and I haven't done an IV drip in 5 years because I went to like an IV therapy place in Laguna and I got horribly sick for like 2.5 days from their drip. But all the ones that I've done at a functional doctor's office in Newport Beach, the ones I would do in New York City with doctors back there before this was cool, like back in like 2010, 2009, 2008, I was doing vitamin drips at a particular doctor's office in New York City. And I would feel amazing for weeks, but I can't do all these pop-up clinics. There's something, they're not all using the same quality product.
That's interesting.
Have you found that? Do you have to be really picky about where you go for your vitamin drips?
I've personally only ever I've had 2 clinics that I've gone to. So one of them she is an integrative medicine physician. And that was long ago when I went there. That was in my early 40s after I had my thyroid removed. And then since then, I've only ever gone to my naturopath doctor and I've never had a problem. So, I'm not sure about pop-up clinics. I can't really say.
Yeah, it's a big thing here in California, IV clinics, where you can go and you just, they have all the different IV drips that you can choose from depending on what your symptoms
Yes.
are. You can get the B12 shots, and they have a few other, maybe vibrational or frequency machines that you can use as well while you're there. But I have not had positive experiences.
Interesting.
I'm going to stick with doing it at a functional doctor's office.
Makes sense. I think that makes sense. I think it's trustworthy. I think I went when I was in Vegas not long ago. I think they had like these little pop-up clinics like that too.
Yeah.
I think I
I
remember
mean, which
that.
is great. Like, I love doing them after a big trip. Like, it's a
Yeah,
great way to come back from a trip that required a lot of you to kind of revitalize at home. But I guess it's like everything, you have to be mindful of the places that we choose, the places that we get our ingredients from. Vitamin
agree.
drips are no different. But I'd love to know, back to food and thyroid. We always hear that if we can eat more seaweed, it's really good for our thyroid. Are there other foods that you try to always keep in your diet weekly or monthly because it's nourishing your adrenals and your thyroid?
Yeah, selenium is a big one. So you mentioned iodine. Selenium is a big one, and it's interesting. I actually read a research article. So I always recommended to clients eat 2 Brazil nuts every single day, right? And I have researched that you can't overdo it on selenium if you eat it, but you can if you take it.
Isn't it funny? Seems like that with
It
so many supplements.
right, because and it kind of makes sense to me because I kind of think, well, you know what? Your body is intelligent enough that it's going to take what you just ate, it's going to process what it needs, and it's going to expel what it doesn't. Whereas nutraceuticals work a little differently in the body, and that may not be the case. So you can overdo it. So selenium is another one. Zinc is another one. And
Mhm.
I think, zinc, it's interesting. Zinc you can get obviously from a lot of nuts and seeds. It's plentiful in animal protein, plentiful. Um, so I'm a big believer in balanced eating and a balanced diet. I have done every diet under the sun, Whitney, like you name it, I've done it. I was at one point eating a ton of raw food. There was another time I was doing almost vegetarian, almost, and then I became almost anemic.
Yeah.
I went on some pretty major restrictive diets because I'm like, where the heck is that body I knew before I had my thyroid out? And I kept trying to chase that as opposed to not accepting or being complacent. I believe, I don't know what you think of this. I don't believe in healthy at every size. I believe this whole movement is not healthy. I believe balance is really where we want to be. And let's just say I've been really chastised for saying that, but I'm like, I'm sorry, but you can't be healthy if you're obese. You just can't. And right? I don't shame people and you're going to find this super interesting, Whitney. Do you know who Dr. Richard Johnson is?
No.
He wrote a couple of books. He's an expert. I think he's a kidney specialist. Anyway, he wrote a couple of books. One of them is called Nature Wants Us to Be Fat, and his specialty is about sugar. And we talked a lot about longevity
Yeah.
and how if you look at the science, people who have just a little bit higher BMI, like 25, 26, maybe 27, actually live longer than the people who are right within that perfect spectrum.
Yeah.
And I found that really fascinating when I read that because what happens when we are too thin is frailty as we age. I'm sure everybody's seen that tiny little old grandmother who might live to 90, but she's so tiny and so frail that you're afraid she's going to break her hip at any time. So it's like we just always have to try to achieve that balance in everything in life. And I think that's an optimal way to live a happier and healthier, vibrant life.
I love that because you do, you know, when you're happy and you're balanced in your body, you glow from within. And if you're starving yourself to look a certain way, you're not going to glow from within. You're still out of balance.
I've been there, girl.
I think every woman and man on the planet goes through that time, you know, where we aren't comfortable with what we see in the mirror or how we feel on the inside. And there's nothing out there that's going to fix that. It's an internal journey. And I find what does fix that is time in nature and finding a balanced pleasure with food. And
Mm.
learning that there aren't good foods, there aren't bad foods, there's just real foods and unreal foods. And I was speaking with a nutritionist the other day who was telling me about how she worked with a client who eats fast food for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And he just wants to be able to lose weight by making healthier choices when he goes to these fast food chains. You either are going to start eating real food or you're going to stick to eating processed food, that fake food, you know, food that can sit on the shelves for years and somebody's just heating it up in a microwave for you. Like it is black and white. And so
Yes.
it's just so black and white and kind of so simple, but we keep making it really complicated. And it's like, I really enjoy revisiting the idea of just de-stressing your life to nourish your adrenals so then you can address the thyroid.
You
This
want to
is
know what I
such,
had for breakfast, Whitney?
yeah, I do.
So my son, who's an adult, he's my adult son, he was working from home today. And I knew I was going to be recording this over lunch. So I had a later breakfast. So I just put a little avocado oil in my pan and got my pasture raised eggs, my antibiotic, hormone free, cage free bacon. And I just made some good old fashioned bacon and eggs for us. And people tend to complicate matters when it comes to food. And you see all of these amazing people on, TikTok and everywhere, and they've got all these fancy things. And I'm like, sometimes life doesn't allow for fancy. For me this morning, I had work to do before we recorded, and I'm like, this is simple and this is easy and this is so nourishing for us. And it's going to give me the brain power to be able to power through lunch and record through. So, but always ingredients matter. And I know
Yeah.
you believe that too. So I always say vote with your dollar and
Yes.
buy those ingredients that are better.
Yeah, and it's always going to be the small businesses that are creating the products with the better ingredients. And I want people to start understanding that the cost of goods, we need to start reevaluating the cost of goods, meaning if it's cheap, we should be concerned. If
Mm,
it's expensive, like ask why. Ask what the extra steps are that they did to make the price what it is. So you can better understand all the layers that go into food production. But if it's cheap, like there's a reason why you should be horrified that you can get a hamburger for $3.99. It should
yes.
actually horrify you versus learning about what it actually takes to 100% graze a cow, process it humanely, and get it to your door. And the nutrient density that that cow is able to give you because of how its body processes the grass and the hay and how it's going to give you amino acids that you just can't recreate anywhere else. And that is the beauty of how this whole ecosystem on Earth works. And there's, going to be different costs behind that because we want to make sure everyone is being taken care of. But the $3.99 isn't a deal. The pasture raised is the deal.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that. I've heard this argument a number of times. Well, we need to feed the world, right? And the world, there's so many people starving. And I'm like, okay. But the people who are going to the McDonald's that we see at every single street corner with all of that factory farm beef, those aren't the people who are starving, Whitney, right? So when you think about it logically, you're like, I was born in 1970. So back in the day, there was like one fast food place that was in, my area, my vicinity. And that fast food was not the same as the fast food now.
Oh, completely. Absolutely.
So I just want, like, I want people to think there's a lot that goes into wellness, not just for your adrenals, not just for your thyroid, but for your whole body. And the simpler you make your food, and as close, like, I come from a lineage, my grandparents are from Croatia. They're deceased. My parents are immigrants who immigrated to Canada from Croatia. I was taught cook everything at home. Cook at home because you know exactly what's in it. And then one day a week, get that little treat that you might buy out, maybe order pizza for the family. And so this is what I call balance. But for
Yeah.
the most part, when you're feeding yourself, you can cook simple meals that will take 10 minutes to make, which is what I did this morning. It doesn't have to be complicated, but it's like the energy of the food that you're eating is nourishing for you.
Absolutely. And one of my favorite meals is a Croatian meal. I love the food in Croatia. I love the water in Croatia. I love how you feel sitting on the hot rocks there. And my favorite meal, whether I was in North or South, is just a great piece of fish. And then they do green chard sauteed with potatoes and olive oil. And it's what a balanced plate. I
Yeah.
get something fresh from the ground. I get the potatoes that keep me rooted. I get the healthy balanced starch, and I get the protein from the sea. I just love that meal. It's so traditional, and it's so naturally balanced and so uncomplicated. I mean, less than 10 ingredients. And that you pay a lot of money for that when you're in Croatia. That's a $50 meal. So, but you can make it at home for a lot less. And it's so simple and it's so light and it's so nourishing. And I think those are the tools that we all need to be reminded of, is that the healthiest meal you can eat is the one that you make at home.
Yes. And that's going to nourish your whole body. Just like what we were talking about, you're going to get some of the nutrients that you need for a healthy thyroid, for healthy adrenals. Listen, as soon as you reach midlife, though, Whitney,
Yeah.
I don't know how old you are. You look young to me.
I'm 43.
Stop it.
Yes.
You look amazing.
Thank you.
Wow. You look amazing.
Thank you. I just turned 43.
Wow. Well, happy birthday. You look amazing. And what I will say is that I think everybody who's listening to your podcast has probably heard of somebody around their 40s who is diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, somebody who's had cancer, somebody who all of a sudden has heart problems and has to take high blood pressure. Your midlife, which is technically around 40, 45, that's technically considered midlife.
Yeah.
That's the time when you need to pay attention to symptoms. Like really, you should pay attention to, I'm not going to say should. It would be great to pay attention when you're younger. I didn't. But when you are in your 40s, your body, I'm going to say, starts saying, I'm going to tap out here. I don't think I like what you're doing anymore. Pay
Yeah.
attention. So sometimes it will be worse than that, and you will have a diagnosis, like I did. I had no idea what was going on with me. There were not women in this space speaking about health back in 2000, and that would have been 2010. I think Facebook just kind of came around. When was that? 2008, something like that. So now there's really no excuse, but you have to see in terms of not having the information. But there's so much of it that you have to determine what do you resonate with and who do you resonate with. So if you're like my age, I'm 54, and you're following a 30-year-old bodybuilder, well, that may not be applicable to you in your journey.
Yeah. And that's what I want. And that's what I think more people, I hope, that are in their 30s are moving towards, is I want to start learning from the people that are just like 10 years ahead of me. What do you wish I would have known? Like, what do you wish you would have been applying in your life or removing from your life when you were in your early 40s?
Oh, the number one thing is a mindfulness meditation practice every time I felt stressed. So I am an ex-smoker. I smoked for 20 years. I quit in my 30s. And oh my God, Whitney. But you know what? One of my favorite sayings is shame dulls your shine. So don't ever be ashamed of your past or of your journey, and use that as a tool to help other people. So I remember I quit smoking with my pregnancies, and then I had little ones. They don't remember me smoking because they were very little, but I remember I'd be like, okay, this is my chance to sneak outside. And I would sneak outside and I would sneak and I'd have that cigarette. And I remember seeing the little ones like in the door going, what's mom doing out there? I know, but they don't remember. And there's no shame in that. That's who I was. And I smoked from when I was 18 to I think 38. So what was that doing for me that I was unable, or I was unaware that I could do for myself? That was giving me that mental break from being a stay-at-home mom, because I quit my full-time job at that time and I needed a break. Like when you have young children, you don't have a break. You're up in the day, you're up at night, you're up through the night. It's very hard. I left my corporate job when my youngest turned 2. I
Mhm.
used to manage a sales team. I was in the corporate world, but staying home was so difficult because I never had a break and I
Mhm.
had a husband that traveled. So that was my break and I didn't know how. So the number one thing is figure out how to stop that turning in the brain of yours. So the
Yeah.
smoking, that was my way. It wasn't good by any means, but that's long gone now. I have tools. Find your tools. Some people have a brain that's extremely busy. I happen to have that kind of brain. I use nutrients to help with that. I take green tea, which actually really helps with the dopamine. Because I tend to, let's just say, I know my genetics inside out, Whitney. I don't know if you're into that stuff too,
Yeah, yeah.
but I tend to get rid of dopamine very quickly and clear it. So what happens, and I carry those genes, and a lot of people do, by the way, I'm always looking for the dopamine hit. Is it food? Is it this? What can I do? So L-theanine is an incredible amino acid. You can find it in green tea. And what it does, it just helps you to hang on to that dopamine a little longer so you're not clearing it. And then the other thing I do for my brain is I use the tools. Because my brain is like that, I need the tools. So I'm not a monk. I'm not one of those people that can sit and put my hands up and go, okay, I'm meditating. I remember long ago, do you know what Muse meditation headband is? Muse,
Oh,
M-U-S-E.
I think I've seen them before.
Okay. So I interviewed them before, and listen, they're great, but it's like a headband and then it gives you an app, and then you look at the app and you're like, okay, did I meditate? Did I do it? Did I?
Too much.
So then it wasn't working for me. So I need something that shuts me off, that puts me in that brain state. It's like a bus that takes me to the stop where I need to go. So that's what I use. I use Brain Tap. I use Newcom. I use Love Tuner. Have you ever tried Love Tuner?
No, I'll check it
They're out of
out.
Malibu.
Oh, very cool. Love tuner.
Yeah, they're called Love Tuner. So Love Tuner is really cool, and there's a lot of imitations out there, so be careful. Love Tuner, it's like a little flute, and it's made out of stainless steel.
Yes, I think I've seen it
Eh,
before.
Yeah, but remember, it's not the same as all those ads you see on TikTok to help people quit smoking. It
Okay.
actually is attuned to the frequency of 528
Okay.
hertz, which is the frequency of love. So it makes you much more tolerant to a lot of the things in the world.
Oh,
So we get triggered a lot. And
yeah.
triggers are simply a way for you to turn around and look at yourself in the mirror.
Yeah.
So the less you get triggered, the more you think, okay, I'm healing. I'm healing myself. I'm healing my traumas. I'm healing my triggers because I'm not as triggered. So all of these things help your brain in a different way. And I know it's a little long-winded, but I think that this is the place to start, because whatever comes through our brain will affect our health and our body. And people don't know how to do this. And then they scroll at night and they've got all this blue light in their face and
Yeah.
it's sad, Whitney.
Yeah, I completely agree. You have to figure out a way to turn it off and put it away and get comfortable with quiet time.
Hmm.
And just before we got on call and started our conversation, I was thinking about already how I need to go for a walk this evening at sunset, no tech on me, and I just need to walk in a place where I constantly can see the sun setting because I know I need that to calm my nervous system. So as the sun is setting, it's not just the light, but it's like you'll be able, your body will start to react to everything settling down. And I know I just
Beautiful.
need to schedule that time. And the great thing is when I do schedule that time, I just go ahead and turn off my phone early and turn off my laptop early. And then that way, when I come back home, everything's already off. I'm not going to take the time to turn it all back on. And so I'll just immediately move into like a more peaceful evening routine of a shower, meditation, reading, etc. You really,
Beautiful.
you kind of have to schedule it right now so you stick with it.
I
Or at
agree.
least that's where I am.
No, I agree with that. You have to, because if you don't take, depending on what stage you're at in your life, it's busy at all stages. We had kids when they were in their teens, they played competitive sports, like big time competitive sports. So we were those parents who were driving around all over the place. And I can empathize with people at all stages, from new moms to parents of teens. And I'm not saying people who don't have children don't have stress. And I find this so interesting. Have you seen that study about how people who don't have children tend to be happier? Have you seen that, Whitney?
I haven't. I haven't yet.
Anyway, I found it kind of funny because I'm like, yeah, kids do cause a lot of stress. And even when they're adults, then they have adult problems. So, but most people I know, they have kids. And so
Yeah.
at all stages, you need to know when to take care of yourself and do what resonates. And I love what you said about the sunset. So I have a dog. So I walk my dog in nature, find nature wherever you are, whatever kind of nature it is.
Mhm.
And I see this all the time. You must see this in California. People who are like intensely jogging in the forest with like headphones on. You can hear their music through the headphones. I'm like, what are you doing?
Yes.
Why? Why? Take the headphones off. Walk. And this is at nighttime. I'm like, one of my own rules, because I know my adrenals can get overactive, is at nighttime, I don't do power walks. I'll do power walk in the morning, sure. But at night, and I never walk in the forest with headphones on, ever. I'm like, listen to my podcast, but don't do it while you're walking in nature.
Yeah. Do it when you're, driving in the car or walking around the track at a high school or,
Yes.
yeah, something
Yeah.
where you can't, because we need to hear the birds. We need to hear the crickets. It's those sounds that help the nervous system and the adrenals. I always think like that's the free vibrational noise that a lot of people are paying for and putting on when they sleep at night. So you got to get really comfortable with turning off the phone and leaving it in the car. I'm notorious in my family. Everybody knows, like when we go on beach walks, I don't have anything on me. Like, so
Mhm.
if you lose me, let me know where you want to meet up. So I think I've built that into my life, and people know and expect that I won't have anything on me. And, I encourage other people to try that. Like, it's okay to not be available for an hour. No one's really going to care. And I think it's different for my friends who have children. But I also think, like, if you constantly think there's going to be an emergency, then there's going to be an emergency. You need to train your brain and your body to know everything in life is going to run smoothly for your greatest and highest good with ease and grace, and that you don't need to make yourself available 24/7 because, the emergency isn't going to happen. I think everyone's trained for the emergency.
That's a great point.
But I don't know. I'm not a parent, so I don't know, but I do have a brother. I do have parents that are in their 70s, but everyone knows when he turns their cell phone off at night. So if there is an emergency, you're going to have to come knock on my door.
Well, it's funny that you say that because, obviously my kids are older. And, now I'm just like, okay, I'm shutting down for 2 hours. I'm recording. Don't bother. Or, my husband and I, if we are going on a vacation, they know that at certain times they won't be able to reach us, or, they're not little anymore. So I get it. I can empathize with people who have littler kids. I'm just not there anymore in that stage of my life. So I'm pretty grateful that that part's over.
Yeah. You've moved through it. Yeah. But
I've
I think
moved through it.
if we just communicate with our family and our friends, I think we can have a better relationship with the tech in our life,
I agree.
which will make us feel so much better.
I agree.
Well, with that, if people want to keep learning from you and with you, since we did not get to half of the questions I put together for you today, just because I've
Oh,
just so enjoyed the flow of our conversation, where can people keep learning from you, get your books, connect with you? Please share all the spaces.
the best place is just follow me on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. It's just Sandy K Nutrition everywhere. I have started, so my essential thyroid guide is out on Amazon. It's very different than what you're going to find anywhere else, only because I purposely did not want it to be a clinical 200-page book. It is more of a high level magazine style. There's a page where you can write notes that you can take to your doctor, to your practitioner. And it's so simple because it's just like touching on all the important things, even labs, what labs to ask for, what do they mean, just so that you have a simple understanding of how to keep your thyroid healthy, even the nutrients that we talked about, all of that's there, how different things like even how stress affects your thyroid. So that's on Amazon everywhere. I am writing my second book, but it's a book. I call it my book. And I just met with my developmental editor. It's a very different premise, and it does tie in with my Substack, Sandy Kruse. So SandyKruse.substack.com. And Substack is really for writers and journalists. So my background, I'm an English literature graduate, but I also happen to be a practitioner and a podcaster. And so find my podcast as well. My book will hopefully come out in early 2025. It's going to be different. It's going to be a series of short essays. Right now, I don't know, I've changed the title so many times, Whitney, but it'll be like 52 essays to help you live a healthier and happier life. And instead of dictating to you what you must do to be healthy, which I've seen a lot of, and we all see it a lot of, it's more of a scientific, theoretical discussion on whether something that's out there resonates with you. So a good example is I wrote an article about prevention for heart disease when you know you have heart disease in your family. Here are the nutrients that I've been feeding my husband who does have heart disease. So that's in my Substack. And this is all useful. I'm not saying you must do this or this is advice for you. It's just exploration in how to be preventative with your health.
Love that. Well,
So, and then my podcast, it's been around for like 4.5 years, Sandy K Nutrition, Health and Lifestyle Queen podcast. It's everywhere. I am starting another podcast. It's Sandy K Gen X Unplugged,
ah,
bringing balance back to the world. So
yeah.
that's hopefully starting up in the fall. And that's it. I'm kind of everywhere, Whitney.
That's awesome. Well, can you leave our listeners with maybe just one last healthy tip they can consider adding into their life?
Well, the number one is get quiet. The number two is, and I'm going to say this because it's so intense right now in our social media circles of wellness, do not listen to all the health advice that you see out there just because somebody's got like 200,000 followers and you think that they know everything about you. Because a lot of people make this mistake. You know, intermittent fasting is a perfect example. When I was intermittent fasting, I became insulin resistant, Whitney. As a woman going through menopause, that it's supposed to be the perfect thing. So this is why I'm saying resonance is so important. And if there's that second bit of advice, other than getting quiet, it's really critically analyze all the health information that's coming to you to see if it resonates with you.
Absolutely. That's where we need to get to. And hopefully you and I and others will be able to help share the tools so people can get quiet and get comfortable in making the right next decision for their health, because that's the next phase of healthcare.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Sandy. This was such a treat. So fun chatting with you.
Thank you, Whitney. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you.